Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast for the last segment of today's show. The best available wide receivers after the Mike Evans deal. He signed a 2-year, $52 million deal to stay in Tampa Bay. But now there's still a decent amount of receivers out there, especially now with the news of who got tagged at the deadline, who's planning to be a free agent. I want to be honest and preface this by saying that if it were up to me, if I were a GM making these decisions, I honestly would rather go with receivers in the draft over free agency just because of the market that everyone's in right now. Garnering that type of money to some of these guys that weren't franchise tagged, I think would be going a little bit too far, especially with this wide receiver class as highly touted as it has been. I think a lot of people will believe that this is one of the best wide receiver classes, one of the deepest classes we've seen in a long time. And I just think there's less risk in drafting a guy there if the decision was up to me, but it's not. So I'm going to talk about the best available receivers that are left on the market, starting with my number 3 being Tyler Boyd, a free agent for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals right now face a situation where the extension of Jamar Chase is looming. It's in everyone's heads, and it's going to come sooner rather than later. You want to get over that sooner rather than later. And on top of that, you have T. Higgins, and he's seen as a potential number 1 wide receiver on a lot of other teams that could be interested in trading for him. There's been rumors around the Bengals settling for a sign and trade with that franchise tag with T. Higgins, and that could be a reality. So those are two pretty serious problems that the Bengals have to deal with, and I think Tyler Boyd, if they were choosing between all three, he would be the one left out. He's going to be 30 in November, so that also doesn't help his case really with the Bengals, but it's not really old by any means for a receiver, and I think he could be a big help elsewhere, specifically with teams like the Eagles, the Steelers, the Falcons, the Chiefs even, needing a veteran sort of player to come in and be a reliable tight end-ish, middle of the field, short check down kind of guy that they could go to. He doesn't need a crazy amount of targets because he's already coming from a situation that he didn't get 10 targets, 12 targets per game, 8 targets per game. He knows that was designated for the younger, talented wide receivers that are on the come up. So I think that wouldn't be a problem with him. SportRack actually values him right now around a 3-year, $26 million deal. So that would be $8 million per year to get a reliable, save hand wide receiver for these teams. And I think he would just bring a security to a lot of these offenses with young quarterbacks or with quarterbacks with young people on their team. And he could help out a lot to kind of settle things down and be a reliable target for some of these teams like I mentioned, the Eagles, the Steelers, the Falcons, and the Chiefs. So that's number 3 on my list. Number 2 would be Gabe Davis. Still very young, coming from a good situation with the Bills, but they're also dealing with salary cap issues, trying to bring down that deficit as much as they can. It raises the question of Stephon Diggs. There were trade rumors around Stephon Diggs and how he could help the cap, but I find it unlikely that they do that. And it seems more and more likely on that topic that Gabe Davis is going to be one of those casualties because of the cap, because of, I think, the direction this Bills team is trending. I think they're going to use a lot more of Dalton Kincaid and James Cook, Dawson Knox if he's there. They're going to become a lot more run heavy, I think, with Josh Allen and James Cook and trying to involve those guys a lot more. Sure, they can draft a wide receiver, and they still have guys like Khalil Shakir there, who are great pieces, solid wide receivers, but I think they just complement a more sort of run-style game that Gabe Davis, don't get me wrong, adds to that. He's a great blocker, but I think they are willing to let him go and be content with what they have in the building to just support their more run-heavy style of offense. You saw it more towards the playoffs where Josh Allen was running a lot more. Dalton Kincaid stepped into his role and kind of grew out of his just rookie tight end role and became a very good weapon for them. And I just think Gabe Davis, still young, could still get a massive contract somewhere else, will take advantage of that. And, Sport Rag as well has him at around a 4-year, $55 million deal. If he were to sign that big of a deal, would bring him to almost $13.5 million for his services. And he hasn't had the numbers to back that up. The majority of the targets have gone to Stephon Diggs, obviously, because of the talent that Diggs has and the kind of money that they're paying him, and because of the relationship he has with Josh Allen. He kind of hasn't had the resume to back up that big of a contract, I believe. But there's definitely teams out there like the Commanders, Chiefs, and potentially the Cincinnati Bengals. If they just sign him on a short-term deal, I think he'd be open to sign a short-term deal if it's with one of those Chiefs, Bengals, in the NFC, maybe the Niners if Ayuk's gone. If he wants to sign to one of these teams, I think he'd be willing to take a shorter deal to sign with one of these contenders. But if he goes to the Lions, the Commanders, or something like that, I think he's going to want more money, more security there to make his time there. You don't want to say worth it, but, just to have some compensation back there for some potential struggles, growing pains, stuff like that. And he's very talented, has good size and everything at 6'2", great in the run game. Another guy that could add another dimension to a variety of these teams like I mentioned. And number one, before people lose their heads or anything, this list was made before Michael Pittman signed the franchise tag, or before the Colts signed or told them that he was going to get a franchise tag. So, he would have been number one, but he was always going to get franchise tags. So he was off the list. He didn't meet the qualifications for this list. And another one that was interesting was Diggs. I thought about it, but he's not really available per se. There's just been trade rumors. So he was an idea that I floated out there, but he wouldn't make the list as well. So my number one on this list, best available wide receiver, is Calvin Ridley. He could have been franchise tagged by the Jaguars, but if he signed a contract extension eventually with them this offseason, he would have been, or it would have allowed the Falcons to turn that third-round pick into a second-round pick. And, he's valued right now, according to Sport Rack, at 4 years, $68 million for him, $17 million per year. That's a heavy price range if you're kind of committing to what kind of contract he would want, and to then give up a second-round pick to the Falcons, that might have been too expensive for the Jaguars. So they didn't do anything with him. He's going to test the free agency market, and because of that, he sits at number one. He is going to be 30 in December, this coming December, obviously during the middle of the season. So that's a factor in whether or not teams want to sign him to a long-term deal, 3 years plus. That's up to the team and how they value what their cap situation is. But in terms of talent and just recent production, he's coming off a 1,000-yard season, led the Jaguars in receiving touchdowns and receiving yards. And other than that, he had that whole gambling issue. I think that's in his past. And I think these next few years, on top of this last season, are going to be some of his best if he signs with the right team. I would love to see him with the Lions. They have a good amount of cap space. I think they're top 5 in cap space among the teams that are the leaders in cap space room. So I would love to see him sign with the Lions to complement Amon-Ra St. Brown, as well as maybe even the Cardinals, because they have a lot of draft picks. They're an exciting young team with Kyler Murray there. If they re-sign Marquise Brown on a minimal deal, and then say potentially they draft Marvin Harrison, that would be an exciting wide receiver room, an exciting offense to complement Kyler Murray, James Conner, and that offense that they're trying to get going in Arizona. But then there's also the Washington Commanders. If they get a quarterback, that could also be exciting. If it's Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams, if he goes number 2. To pair him up with Calvin Ridley, a solid wide receiver 1 with these kind of numbers that I just mentioned, not only will it help the quarterback out, but it'll make the transition for the quarterback a lot easier with an established wide receiver one. They're just waiting for him. And then there's other teams like the Titans as well. They need someone opposite of DeAndre Hopkins, so they would love another wide receiver. It all has to work out in their cap, and they have a new quarterback, a young quarterback in Will Levis. They're trying to build that offense up through their new offense with obviously a new head coach in there as well. They could be an option, but Calvin Ridley, I am a fan of him. Skill-wise, ability-wise, I think he really hasn't shown that he's lost a step, and I think he'd be a big help compared to these other wide receivers. I think he would be ready to help out the most right now, right away, to any of these other teams that decides to sign him. Free agency is only going to get crazier and crazier now that the franchise tag deadline is gone. It's past us now. We're going to head into the new year, which is about almost a little bit over a week from today. It starts on the 13th, and there's been a lot of initial dominoes that have fallen already. Mike Evans off the market. All these free agents now available. I think teams are starting to become more active, and a lot of these hypotheticals are going to start becoming realities, and it's just going to bring a lot more things for me to talk about, and I'm very excited to get going in that process. But in saying that, that's all the time I'm going to have for today's episode. I want to say a big thank you to you guys again for listening, tuning in, and watching these episodes as well. Even if you tune in late, I greatly appreciate every time you guys do that. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. It's a big help every time you guys do that, and make sure to also follow us on our other social media networks, platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all that for more sports content as well as other content across other networks and other podcasts as well. And if you do like this show and want to see more of me and this show, please make sure to check out both the Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel on YouTube for YouTube shorts that I put out there as well. Individual segments from these live shows if you missed one of them and want to recap on one of them, as well as full other live shows that I've done in the past. It's all on there on both channels, so make sure to go check that out. In saying that, I've been your host, Manny Maradiaga. Tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL and football conversations. Take it easy, guys. I'll see you guys all same time tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to